This is the Astrology Show podcast with Jessica Adams.
Thanks, Shane. This is your astrology and tarot for the week starting Monday, the 8th of April. Aries, Diana in Leo, in your zone of teenagers, millennials, and a younger generation, has landed. And this week, you have to ask how you bring somebody much younger down to earth when he or she is off in their own little world. Maybe you decide that you don't want to get too involved, and yet you can see that this person who is so different to you, not just in age but attitude, has great assets in hand. And if you're a parent, for example, and this is your teenage son, you may want to get quite hands-on about it. It really depends. You may be a teacher and perhaps this is a student in your class. But whatever is facing you this week is really about understanding how to speak their language. If you do feel that you need to get involved and you care enough to step in and intervene because they are not being practical about everything that's so valuable in their hands, then you do need to find a way to not heavy them too much, but find your own way with them. Taurus. Well, the big question this week is, do you walk away or do you go back and try again? Uranus in Taurus is in an exact conjunction with Panacea in Taurus. In plain English, what you call stability, security, the known in your life is about to be in question. And you have to figure out, do you want to go back and make it work a second time? Or are you going to embrace change and strike out for something that has no guarantees, that's totally untried in your life? We have to ask what a tower of power says to you. Maybe the tower isn't that powerful. It may be your home, your office, perhaps it's some sort of institution or establishment. But the thing about being a Taurian is you are an earth sign, you're grounded and somewhat attached to being attached. So now you have quite an unusual choice. The time has come to be honest with yourself. Are you going to try and stick to what you know and who you know and make it function again? Or are you going to do something very un-Taurian and strike out for pastures new? Gemini. Pluto in Aquarius is showing you life-changing options in other countries, other nationalities, in other places with other faces, in other spaces. At the same time, you have Diana in Leo asking you to think about your projects, plans, and ideas with more research. These can go locally, regionally, or internationally. Diana in your chart this week is a terrific symbol of freedom, liberty, space, and room to roam. It's in Leo in your third house of internet, publishing, connection, communication, information, and transportation. What is the target and where is it? How have others fared there? With a bit of management, Gemini, and research, who knows what power could be unleashed? Cancer. The Pisces transits this week are about big ideas, huge projects, massive concepts. The Virgo transits at the other end of your chart are about a commitment. Put them together, and if you want a brainwave or a master plan to work long term, then you have to commit to it. You almost have to marry it. We have quite a lot of important Uranus transits in April, and they tend to produce sudden flashes of inspiration or unexpected bolts from the blue. The trick is to take them, plant them, nurture them, and then go on tending them in just the right place. But if you do nothing this week, that chance may not be back. Leo. Well, with Minerva in your zone of groups, circles, communities, social media networks, teams, and all the rest, you are wise to be on the right side with people who see it your way. This is quite an important week for tactics, group psychology, the hive mind, and all that comes with high strategy. Yet you also have to look at the person who has been rejected and is rejecting. In a very few cases, Leo, you are that outsider, and you have to think very hard about where your current stance is getting you. But in most cases this week, your chart suggests that You are in a circle of people who must now look at somebody who is very much on the outer and figure out, do we compromise? Do we reach for an olive branch? Or what will the next step be? Virgo. You have money this week or are strongly affected by a woman who does. A huge stellium in Aries in your eighth house of finance, business, property, and charity is unfolding. At the other end of the chart, we have the South Node in Libra, the sign ruling your own values and your own life budget. Virgo, male or female, you may be strongly affected by a woman in possession of a lump sum of money. There is no rush here, but there are long-term implications. In fact, you could call it karma. The nodes of karma are in your finance sectors, and what goes around this week comes around 19 years from now. Libra. Ever the peacemaker Libra, or keen to support a peacemaker, you are now in the presence of a possible truce. You have a ton of Aries patterns this week in your sector of duels, and the duel is, of course, a waste of time. If you know that you have been on the attack, then you may need to accept that there are better ways to use your time and energy and to not prolong the feud. This is Aries weather, and if you feel this week that others have been against you, then do all you can to encourage the peacemaker in the picture. Finally, Libra, you may actually be that negotiator. It may be you who is intervening in a situation where one has been against one or still is. The overriding message of this week's chart patterns is that you all have better things to do with your time and energy. Scorpio. This week is about the total eclipse, of course, and understanding how a lunar cycle affects you. If you have to go away to find value in relationships again, then so be it. You have Ceres in Capricorn in your zone of short journeys, sabbaticals and getaways. And Ceres brings empowerment in your zone of short journeys. You do need recharging or new power in your emotional batteries. As a sensitive water sign, you seem to be dealing with unfulfilling or even slightly tarnished connections this week. The people are actually solid gold, but it does not look that way to you, not on this eclipse. But once you return from your getaway, it will look so much better later. Sagittarius. Ceres in Capricorn in your second house of money is a big compromise, some for you and some for me. Half savings, half expenditure, half debt, half credit. Ceres is associated with 50-50 deal making. Now, it's not your fault that the economy is so wild. That is the world astrology, Uranus in Taurus. Yet you have to find a way to cope. Juggling is not it, but creating some kind of system which will take the uncertainty truly is, and you can even gain from it. Capricorn. A large lump sum of money is available to you this week. Perhaps you have made a deal with a rich man or big corporation. Maybe you feel you could have more money, but are unsure about reaching for it. Lots of money does interestingly draw some anti-reactions from people. However, with Pluto in your second house of wealth, for the first time in 248 years in the sign of Aquarius, this week Pluto makes great transiting aspects. So this is the sort of money that could see you moving or travelling, improving your home, and opening the gate to something so much bigger and better. Reach for it and believe in it. Aquarius. Sometimes Pisces weather in your zone of values and money will make a really big dramatic point to you. So this week, it may be you who has a lot of money and you're in a position to help others, family, friends, or maybe it's your job. You can also equally find yourself in need, holding out your own hands for help, maybe from the government, a family member, or a philanthropist. This week, in your birth chart, the Taurus weather is about values, principles, ethics, and morals, what cannot be bought or sold. A situation like this with the haves and the have-nots is so tricky, but you can work to get the moral value right. Pisces. Diana in Leo in your zone of healing, doctors, dentists, psychologists, and also spiritual healing, emotional help is here. Diana is a symbol of independence, so you tend to get a reaction of don't crowd me if you are a nurse, a surgeon, a therapist, and so on. But it also works the other way too. It can be therapeutic to be the healer. But again, there's this sense of somebody needing space, not dependency, but independence maintained, even though the balance of power is firmly in the hands of the healer. This is a really important week in your chart when things can be changed. Your tarot cards this week are Aries, the Page of Cups, Taurus, the Tower, Gemini, the Three of Wands, Cancer, the Ace of Wands, Leo, the Nine of Wands, Virgo, the Queen of Pentacles, Libra, the Five of Swords, Scorpio, the Eight of Cups, Sagittarius, the Two of Pentacles, Capricorn, the Ace of Pentacles, Aquarius, the Six of Pentacles, and Pisces, Strength. Natal chart factors triggered this week are in Aries. Do you have factors there? If so, your first house of image is triggered by the total solar eclipse on April 8th and 9th. They are calling it the Great North American Eclipse. It's a new moon with the sun at 19 Aries and moon at 19 Aries. The only issue is it conceals, it blots out and blacks out. If you have any Aries factors at all, then skip April 8th and 9th for choices about digital ID, self-ID, your face, title, reputation and name, your profile, your photograph, or YouTube clip. On a more basic level, think about getting Botox another time. Adopt a new fake name another time. I'll go into the eclipse more in a moment. If it's your birthday this week, then the short journeys that you plan from late May and take from June are fantastic. Some will change your life. Neighbouring places can feel like overseas trips if it's your birthday this week. Famous birthdays include Brian Setzer, 65 on the 10th of April, Neville Staple, 69 on the 11th of April, Will Sargent, 66 on the 12th of April, and David Cassidy would have been 74, born on the 12th of April. Fated connections this week, all through money, are Virgo, Sagittarius, Capricorn, and Aquarius. Babies born this week are feisty and can be tearaways on their Mars return, aged around 2. They do need an outlet, and when they're older, football is a good one. And so to the eclipse. You'll hear a lot about this online. All the astrologers are talking about it, particularly in the US. As you know, this one is in Aries. A new moon in Aries, but also accompanied by Mercury retrograde in Aries, so it's tricky. Now, Aries rules identity, and we should be very concerned about what corporations or governments are trying to get past us on April 8th and 9th. We have Mars in Aries, Chiron in Aries, the North Node in Aries, all in your first house of profile, name, address, classification, and labelling. Looking at the long-term future, Saturn in Aries from May 24th, 2025 until September 1st, 2025 is the first big difficult reality check. All of us this week need to not walk blindly into the eclipse. Saturn goes on through Aries from February 13th, 2026 to April 12th, 2028. In astrology, the future causes the present. We can choose this week on the eclipse to walk into minor challenges about identity or to go into a situation between 2025 and 2028 where we deeply regret not asking more questions and pushing back harder. Saturn was in Aries in 1996 to 1998. That was when 100 countries had laws making ID cards compulsory. The Queen's speech in the UK on that cycle waved them in. Saturn is always a really heavy reality check. You can't get out of things. And in Aries, you can't get out of heavy ID issues. Or you can, but you need to take steps this week, eclipse week, to make sure that the future is not more difficult than it has to be. We also saw Saturn in Aries from 1937 to 1940. This was the era of ID cards and identity papers because of the war. Nazi Germany called it a Ken card. It said if you were Jewish, a gypsy, Ukrainian, and so on, you had a particular colour of the card based on your racial background. So you can see why a lot of people are deeply concerned about digital ID. And a lot of astrologers are looking at the future of Saturn in Aries and saying this far and no further this week. We also saw Saturn in Aries in 1967 to 1969, and this was the era of the Vietnam War dog tags. They were literally heavy ID. Saturn rules lead, and you could be and were buried with them. Saturn's not exactly much fun. It's not a breezy, light and easy astrological influence, but it needs to be respected. And the great gift of astrology and history is that forewarned is forearmed. You can't stop Saturn in Aries in the future, nor Neptune in Aries in the future, which is going to make the current experiments with virtual reality and alternative selves look like child's play today. And all of this is in the future, but the future can be and should be controlled now. But the Aries weather now is pretty textbook. It's all about the face and the head, so electronic tagging should be checked this week, and Facebook, for obvious reasons. The clue is in the name. In fact, Twitter, X, Facebook, Instagram, and all the rest of them are so Aries in nature, being all about your ID and your head and shoulders, that you really need to look twice to see what you're not seeing on April 8th and 9th. I was talking a bit about the eclipse last week and famous examples of what can happen. So a good one to think about is the fact that Princess Diana and Prince Charles went on their honeymoon on an eclipse. They chose to set sail on the Britannia on the day of a Leo eclipse, shortly after getting married near another eclipse. So whenever that happens, you get what you might expect. You have a big diversion or a big distraction, which takes away from the truth or the facts of the matter. So this is the most famous woman in the world, and all eyes are on Diana. It's where the paparazzi are pointed. Nobody is looking at Charles, and nobody is looking at Mrs. Camilla Parker Bowles. But even then, the wheels were in motion for a replacement queen. So be careful about what you do on an eclipse. It's certainly not the time for a honeymoon or a wedding, come to that. If you are proceeding towards nuptials, be aware of what you may not be aware of. The other thing about an eclipse is that you often see shadows in photographs. So there is actually a photograph of Diana on board the Britannia with her shadow behind her on the wall. Eclipses leave us in the shadow. They leave us in the dark, but there's often a kind of shadow play. So it's pretty common to be diverted by something or someone that looks like the real story. Meanwhile, the action is happening around the corner or out of sight. And that's why this eclipse in Aries is so important if you do have Aries factors, because on a broader level, it is going to be about ID and the future of identity owned by governments or corporations. That's really important. But on a more basic level, it's going to be about your title at work, the title that you get if you apply for a job, letters after your name. It may be about your glasses or your contact lenses. It may be about something quite trivial that makes a big difference to you above the neck, which is what Aries rules. And Aries is also very much about reputation. Aries is the sign that's ruled by Mars in astrology, the Roman god of war. So everything about Aries is pretty Roman. It's your title, your reputation, your front, how you front up, and how they label you. It's also about your body shape and height, how strong you are, how fit you are or not, and the impact that you make just by showing up. Your reputation precedes you. All of this also suggests to us the American election because it's all based, of course, on reputation and profile. Nobody ever really knows the deep truth about any of these people. There's something about this eclipse as well that is quite murky, and you'd want to be watching what you're not seeing on the 8th and the 9th, just to be aware of the games that people are playing. Mercury retrograde in Aries is with you until the middle of May. So in that area of your chart, image, identity and profile, you're going to see life go backwards and forwards anyway. You're going to see lots of paper trails going backwards and maybe missing emails or missed telephone calls regarding your name. Or you may find that your business card comes out with the wrong spelling. That can happen too. Mercury retrograde in Aries also suggests that anybody who thinks that they are getting away with new laws on identity has to think twice. We are going to see a backlash in May, and as Mars goes through Aries, people are going to become quite heated about their ownership of their identity online. So that's a whistle-stop tour through the eclipse. I'll look at your solar chart as well to look at the life area that's most affected. If you do or don't have Aries factors in your birth chart, that's a separate issue. As I've said, it's about your ID and profile. But in your solar chart, there's a public story going on this week. In fact, it's been there for a while that you may want to hang back on. For an Aries, it is in fact about how you're seen, your external, the superficial you. And if you're a Taurus, it's about religion or your rejection of religion. It's about therapy or counselling. It's about hypnosis or the tarot, mediumship or psychics. It's about your inner self and inner life. So, for example, on April 8th, you wouldn't join a new church. If you're a Gemini, then it's in your zone of groups and friends, allies, communities, and social life. One thing that we do know about Mike Pence is that he's a Gemini. We don't know if Donald Trump is or not because he's given us two completely different birth dates. But for Geminis in the Republican Party, there will be the mother of all hoodwinking going on this eclipse, and we won't know about it until May. But as a Gemini with a team, a club, a band, not just a political party, but maybe a social circle, you may want to skip April 8th and 9th and draw your conclusions about people later. If you're a Cancerian, this is in your 10th house of role, goal, mission, ambition, and position. It's terribly important, of course, because it's right at the top of your chart. But you're not really going to see much straight progress here until after May the 14th. You may go backwards and forwards with things. Most importantly, remember the shadow rule on April 8th and 9th, because the situation will be absolutely overshadowed and it's almost impossible to see. If you're born under the sign of Leo, then this is about foreign people and places. It's also about the World Wide Web. It's about publishing and academia, and sometimes in the context of foreign people. Basically, as a sun-ruled person, you are strongly affected by the eclipse. Cancer, the other moon-ruled person, is the only other sign to be so strongly affected. So normally you would see things quite clearly in the spotlight, in the frame. There would be no issue here about missing anything, but you're missing quite a lot on eclipse day. If you're a Virgo, then this transit through Aries is about financial relationships based on partnership. It's about your family and property, and it's also about inheritance for obvious reasons. The marriage and the mortgage falls here. What you're seeing or not seeing on April 8 and 9 is a big chunk of missing information. Eclipses aren't good or bad, but they tend to tally with events that people are trying to hide or cover up. And that's why you wouldn't proceed with a financial matter on it. If you're a Libran, it's about your partner or it's about your open enemy or opponent. What you need to do here is, again, remember the golden rule, that what you think is true and what you assume is there and what you guess is going on could be so far from the truth, it's incredible. And it may be safer for you to wait until you draw judgment or conclusion. If you're a Scorpio, this is about work and health. It's about your duty and your service, your paid and unpaid work, your mental and physical health. And for obvious reasons, you wouldn't go for a checkup on April 8 or 9. Whistling in the dark is not a bad analogy for what's going on. But if you have the luxury of choosing any time at all, Scorpio, you'd move the dates forward so that you can see clearly. If you're a Sagittarian, then this transit is about children, babies. It's about courtship and the bedroom and a younger generation. And again, if you were going, say, for an adoption, or you were making decisions about your son's school, you'd want to choose another date. Sometimes it's as fundamental as the school having plans that you don't know about that are going to affect everything. And certainly with internet dating, you'd give the 8th and 9th a pretty wide berth. If you're a Capricorn, then this is about your family. It's about your extended family, your hometown and homeland, your household, and your notion of home. You wouldn't go to a property auction on an eclipse, and you wouldn't make a decision about your father on an eclipse. You would wait until it was out of the way. And if you can choose any time at all to put this in writing, you'd be looking at the second half of May when Mercury retrograde is over. If you're an Aquarian, then this is about your brother or sister or cousin. And there is a big shadow over that in that you cannot see what's really going on. It's not negative nor positive, it just is what it is. And it's the same for you with the internet and the media. So you'd skip the 8th and 9th and be very aware of those ID issues that I was talking about. If you're a Pisces, then this is about the money, the business, the charity or the property and the valuables. And you'd be hard-pressed to find any astrologer telling you to go ahead with a contract on an eclipse or even to go seriously shopping or selling on eBay, just because so much of it's undercover and under wraps. In fact, the internet as a whole is like an aquarium full of fish that you cannot see. You don't really know what's moving around there behind the coral or the shells. So on April 8 and 9, remember the aquarium that you're in online and wait for the eclipse to pass you by. I'll catch up with you next week.